Hello. Hi. Welcome back for another week of some free live coaching. So, thank you everyone for coming, and very excited to be here. I love all of the live little bits that happen, and every week there's a little something different. But I see there's Leota. Leota, you want to? I actually can hear you this week because last week I couldn't hear you. You want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi. It's nice to see you guys again. I've actually had people, because this is Lydia, and Lydia shows up like every week. And so in some of the streams, when you go back and watch the replays, oh yeah, I'm going to say bye. Okay, I'm going to take you guys off. I keep referring to like Lydia because Lydia is in the studio. So if you come into StreamYard and follow the link, you can be on screen with me just like this. And otherwise, if you're watching in YouTube or Facebook, you can send a comment through. You're welcome to go ahead and try that now. Just send a comment. And if you do that, I can show your comments. There's Georgia. So if you do send a comment, like Georgia just did, I can put it up on the screen. So as we go through the exercises and we practice, I can ask you, how was that for you? And if you send some comments, I can give you some feedback live to see if there's any way that I can help your experience. I can still hear some music in the background, so I'm going to pull that off. And all right, sorry, multitasking. Boop, and put that on there. This week we're going to be talking about mindfulness from the perspective of. So in other weeks we've done mindfulness from the perspective of watching our senses, and by simply becoming aware and watching our senses, or being mindful of our senses, observing our senses, it reduces anxiety. Just from the very fact that you're even paying attention to the here and now tends to actually take your attention off of the thing that you're scared of, or that might be happening, that you're scared of happening. But by being in the present moment, you can become aware of the fact that there really isn't that much scary going on around you right now. And that's enough to reduce your anxiety. But we're going to also take a look at the next kind of level of that. I'm just aware, I'm going to make a call out for some local help in the studio here. Michelle, do you mind turning off the furnace? Thanks. Just realizing that there's a furnace like literally right there off screen, and the microphone can pick that up. So there you go. There's less noise happening now in for us for the stream. Every week I've been working on, for anybody that's been following, this is week 14 that I've been doing this. And this has been something that I've been practicing for the 14 weeks. I started going live 14 weeks ago, and as a way of being at service to people that were actually coming and seeing me for one-on-one sessions. And because of lockdowns and job issues, people have asked that I can put out some content that is more affordable. And instead of making it like more affordable, I just made it free. And so every week I give out this free content that is quite generally the content that I would give out in a private session. And I thought it would be more, instead of just putting out content as YouTube videos, I thought that by making it interactive, it would actually be replicating a session to some degree. If you have suggestions or questions of things that you want for me to discuss in these live streams, I will do that for you. And that way I can actually be more targeting of your exact situation. But for now, if there are no requests, I just do what I feel like that week. And this week, what's been really coming up a lot is the idea of observing versus judging as a means of reducing anxiety, as a means of reducing stress, as a means of overcoming trauma, or moving through trauma to the next phase, which we hope to be acceptance. And then after that, finding purpose and empowerment in it. So that's kind of the stages that we move through in the type of work that I do, where I'm helping you move through the past into the future. Okay. So we're going to, if anybody wants to shout out, send a comment, just a special note, because I see that people are joining. If anyone is watching on my personal Facebook account, your comments do not come through into StreamYard, into here. So I can't see them on the side of my screen. So if you do want to make a comment, you have to go to my YouTube channel or go to my business page, which is still under my name. You just have to go to the one that looks like a business page, Peter Arcari, instead of personal page, Peter Arcari, and then I will see your comments in the stream. I really want to get into it, so I'm kind of moving through this quickly. If you see me looking at you, that's because that's my camera. And if you see me looking down, it's because I want to be able to read the comments that are coming in so I can do this live. So bear with me as I look down and up to try and stay interactive with you. Also, for all those that have been following every week there's a slightly different camera and lighting setup. I'm pretty happy with this one so far. And for anybody that's I can see on screen, can you just give me a thumbs up to identify that you can hear me well right now? Great, thank you. All right, let's move through this, okay? I'm gonna bring this up on screen. I have to get into the habit of not touching the screen because it shakes the camera. Yeah, here we go. So we're going to be discussing what does it even mean to be. I mistyped that. What is the difference between judging and reframing? And that's actually not what I meant to say. I want to say, what is the difference? I'm going to just fix that now, between judging and observing. Okay, so I'm going to type that as we talk about it. So observing would be being very literal about what can be experienced through your senses. But as an observation, we would expect that the majority of people witnessing or experiencing the same thing you're observing should have similar responses. So as an example, there is a light right here. It's shining on me. Okay, that light is being shielded by a white umbrella. These are purely observations, and I would hope that anybody sitting beside me who has vision would see a white umbrella there. I should hope that somebody who can see colors would see the reds, or they might have a different experience of what that red is. Some people see it as green or brown. But see, that's an observation. Now, all observations do have some amount of interpretation, but judging, the real major difference between judging and observing is the interpretation. So this is a white umbrella. It is, let's call that 32 inches wide. Now, if I say that's a medium umbrella, that is an interpretation because it's relative, it's on a scale. So whether or not this umbrella is large, small, requires another thing to compare it to. And that's where judging comes into play. Observing, and I'm just basically, this right here is laying the groundwork for what we're about to talk about, because we're going to apply the same concept to your emotions, events that have happened to you, experiences that you might not really know what to do with. How do I interpret that? Should I call that good or bad? Did that person mean to say what they said, or should I be upset about what they said? These are all things that we're deciding for ourselves what is our interpretation. Observing is something that should be an experience of not really deciding per se. Like, I can decide between calling this umbrella 100 centimeters wide versus, whatever, let's call it 2.75 feet wide. I mean, that might be a choice of how to observe it. But essentially, anybody with the same yardstick should call it 100 centimeters, and anybody with the same meter stick should call it 100. Anybody with the same yardstick should call it 2 whatever. You get what I'm saying? There should be the same number of inches. So where this gets a little tricky is when I like to use the example of like a barking dog. This is kind of a go-to for me. Me and a person I'm walking beside, a friend of mine and I are walking down a street. And there's a person walking in this opposite direction with a dog. And that dog is scruffy. This particular, I'm actually going to reference a real one. I started off by just using my generic example, but I'm going to go into a real one. A scruffy dog is being walked, and I see that scruffy dog, and I might call it, I might say that the hair is very messy. I might say that the hair is scruffy. And my friend looking at the same dog would call that, just use different words, cute, fun, the wildness of the hair. And these are entirely all judgments and interpretations, and they're personal. But what we can agree on is the dog is brown. The dog is not a small dog or a medium dog. That dog is 22 inches tall. It's not a light or heavy dog. It's possibly just right. And so where this observing and judging really gets into trickiness is when we start judging that as being preferable or not. I like that dog. I like the size of that dog. I find that dog easy to manage. I personally like owning dogs that I can pick up. I don't like owning dogs that I can't pick up. It's too hard to manage. So this now gets into personal interpretation, which is really a relationship that you have with the thing that you are observing. Once you create a relationship and an interaction, it starts moving into judging. Okay. And we can be better, especially as a therapy provider and a coach. There's impartial listening, there's unbiased listening, there's observing and listening and holding space for somebody who's sharing with me, where I can just simply reply and reflect back. I hear that you're having a rough day. Oh, I see. Okay. I hear that somebody said something to you that caused you to be stressed. I hear that you think what they said was mean. All right. And that's just being an impartial listener. As soon as a client might say, do you think that was good or bad? Do you think I'm right or wrong to have reacted that way? Well, now we're getting into judgments and personal interpretations. And we have to separate out that each person is going to have their own individual interpretation. And that's what we're going to move through today. Can you have the power to shift your perspective from one that you are holding to one that somebody else might be holding? Can you create flexibility in the way that you're judging or perceiving an event? Because something that you might be calling really hard on you, something that you might be calling heavy and rough and it makes you feel stuck and trapped. Somebody else might look at that exact same situation and say, oh, that's not a problem. That's easy. Yeah, that's a challenge. But I feel like I'm up to that challenge. I see that as an opportunity. Words really change things in a big way. Any feedback on that? Any comments? Everybody with me so far? Okay. So how we interpret that, we call that in neurolinguistic programming, we refer to that as an internal representation. So there is an observation of something. This is a white umbrella. And then the internal representation is the meaning, the way that I perceive it, the way that I'm going to relate to that. Okay. And it requires a form of judgment. And all judgment is on a scale. And I think that's an important thing to also point out, that scale, not only of whether or not I call that umbrella a large umbrella, a small umbrella, and that's relative to all umbrellas on Earth, or all the umbrellas that I've seen at least, there's also an internal scale. And the internal scale tends to change. An observation, every day I come back, the umbrella is still 32 inches wide. Every day. No matter how much I try and get around it, it's still 32 inches. But one day I come in and go, oh man, I'm thinking that umbrella is too small. Next day I come in, I'm thinking that umbrella is a little too big. It doesn't quite fit the way I thought it would. And then, Goldilocks, you know what? This umbrella is just right. So, there is that. The internal representation is something that can change. And that's a good thing. That means that you can take something that you have decided is rough one day, heavy, sad, and over the course of some mindfulness, over the course of some observing and separating out, being aware of your scale that you have access to, you can take some space and some distance from that interpretation, and then you can come back and have a different experience of it. Oh, well, that experience wasn't so sad now that I'm through it. Internal representations change, and they're on an internal scale that is independent of the actual external situation. Where do we get these interpretations from? Well, predominantly it's from past experience. If this is the only umbrella I've ever seen, I don't have a scale to even call that big, small, right, wrong. How would I even know? I don't know what all the umbrellas are to even know if that's too white, too yellow, too big, just right. So we tend to get our interpretations from validation. So we either get taught what to think before we have an experience. Okay, kids, we're at the amusement park and you've never been on this roller coaster before. And I know when you're standing back and look at it, it looks really tall and you hear people screaming while they're on it. But trust me, once you get on that roller coaster, you're going to think it's fun. So now there's this preloading, this presupposition that to presuppose that once you're on it, it's going to be a different experience than when you're looking at it. And so the first place we get our interpretations from is from some form of education or guidance that is trying to guide us towards an experience. And that can go both ways. Oh yeah, no, we avoid roller coasters, kids. They're too dangerous. And, I heard one story once of one person being harmed by it. And now forever it's scary to me, even though every day there's thousands of people going on it and they're fine. Our parents are a major source of where these interpretations came from. And then after our parents, as we get older, that becomes our immediate friends, our immediate social network. Once we're in the 7 to 10 years old range and we're going to school and we're just trying to take on the interpretations of the social norm for whatever we have access to at 7 to 10 years old. And then once we get into a bigger world, we're hitting the internet, we're seeing all kinds of interpretations. That's still an external source, but that's one place where we get our interpretation from. I just want to say a shout out to everybody that's joining in right now. Thank you very much. Please send a comment through, and if I see your comment, then you know that I can hear you and see you, and because I don't want to miss any questions or comments that you send through. If I don't see anything come through and I don't reply, it means I may not be able to see your comments. But thanks for joining. Stay with me. So that's external, and we try and build our interpretation, our internal representation, our internal view and perspective over something we may have never done before. We try and get that from the average. The other place we get our interpretations from is, of course, personal experience. And where that comes from is our nervous system. So if I am sitting near a fire and I consider that to be something that's warm for me because I'm cold, I might internalize that as being helpful and good for me because it's making me warm. But if that's my couch that's on fire, doesn't really matter to me how cold my apartment is. I'm probably going to think that's a bad thing. I might spend a little moment and go, well, that is nice and warm, but it's probably going to continue on to being a little too hot in here if I let that go on. So there is this internal, even if I've never had a couch on fire in my apartment, which I have not and will not ever have that happen to me, but if that is something that's entirely new to me, we are all going to first and foremost refer to some teaching, some lesson that somebody else tried to give us about an event that we've never been through, number one. And number two, we're going to look into our nervous system response in that moment. And that nervous system response to my couch burning on fire, oddly enough, on one day could be something horrible and terrifying to me. And on another day, in a different life experience, I can call that the greatest thing ever. That might lead to a really great insurance payout. That might lead me to finally get that new couch. We don't know how I'm going to interpret it, but I really want to make the point here. It's on a scale. It can change. It's internal. It doesn't have to be the same thing every day. And that's a good thing because we can work with that. So external habit being formed and trained in, we call that nurturing. And then there's our internal reaction in the moment. We call that nature, not necessarily naturing, but nurture versus nature. And, some people, I'm just going to hide that for a second. It is in some people's nature to love adventure, to love the adrenaline rush. So, to a person who by nature loves excitement, that couch being on fire is going to be like an epic adventure. It's going to be a great story. They're going to get through it. They love the challenge. They want to overcome that challenge. Those archetypes might be the warrior archetype. That might be the sage, somebody who likes to learn about an experience. That might be the caregiver. They might just love the idea of being able to take care of something that's on fire. And that's obviously a bit of a metaphor now. And then there are people that are the, I don't know what you'd call that as an archetype, like the farmers, the people that are the gatherers out of the hunter and gatherers. The gatherers are people that want for things like the squirrels. They want to gather things, they want to put them where they're supposed to go, and they want them to stay that way. And they don't want the adventure. Some people, it's in their nature to not want sudden things changing without expectation. That's in your nature, and you can decide for yourself. Are you more of the adventuring type that likes the unexpected, spice of life, or are you the kind of person that finds comfort and calm in things staying exactly the same, and you're more of a nest maker, a homemaker? You're more of like of a monk, a monk or a meditator type archetype. In that case, you might like for things to be very still and very peaceful. And both of them are okay, but it's going to affect your interpretation of the same event. One person jumping out of an airplane thinks it's the greatest adventure ever, and another person jumping out of an airplane is like, why am I here? Why shouldn't even be here right now? I should just leave right now and go meditate. It's coming. All of this points to this very commonly spoken of statement in mindfulness and meditation. You can't control, and even in anxiety, helping people with general anxiety, you can't control the event. You can only control your reaction to the event. And this is all about what we're talking about. But I do want to, again, I'm making point to the nature. You can have a fair amount of control over the nurture, the way that you were taught to believe that something is scary. You might come to realize that was really only your parents' interpretation or your friend's interpretation. Maybe they had a bad experience, but you might find that it's in it's in your nature to actually really enjoy that. And through your own life experiences, you realize you can control your reaction by regularly encountering a situation and growing resilient, and then eventually learning to love something. That's called exposure therapy. So this is something that works well for people with a phobia. So beyond just general anxiety, getting into a fear into a phobia, after fear becomes phobia, where phobia is a fear that impacts your ability to live a normal life. So your normal everyday things like brushing your teeth. An overactive, irrational fear of something in the world going wrong might actually stop you from even just being able to brush your teeth or wash your face or feed yourself. That moves into like a phobia or something that requires some medical, like psychiatric medical attention or medical attention. But this does help with all levels of anxiety and fear. But you'll find the impact of this, the change of this concept is faster and easier as you're in low anxiety response. I like that I type these out because it forces me to pause, because I get really excited to talk about this. And I could just talk about this all day. And I'm very excited about it because I love the freedom that this knowledge can bring. I love the idea that having a different perspective, or being taught that we have control over our perspective. I love the freedom that brings me, that I don't have to be trapped in an anxiety response. I like knowing that there is the freedom to take a pause, center. That was last week's stream. Center, get into the moment, and actually start to choose, after recognizing what my reaction is in the moment, pausing that reaction, understanding that I have response ability, an ability to respond. And with my response ability, I might decide this is an opportunity. I might change the word I use in that moment. So how much control do we actually have over our reactions? Hi to everyone that's joining in. Thank you very much for coming. It does benefit me that you're here. So thank you so much for your energy. And I hope that you're served by this content. So I think the amount of control we have technically is almost all. Your internal representation is a choice that you do have control over, but the amount that you feel like you have is relative to how often you've done it. And this is where I was making a point about exposure therapy. The more times you repeat the practice of having control over your reactions, the more normal it becomes, the quicker you get to a place of having control over reaction, the faster you get there. And there comes a point where you actually even start to preempt your reaction. Oh, I already know that dog is going to bark when I walk by. I'm already okay with that. I'm expecting it. And therefore, the reaction that you have is something that you can decide in advance. And that becomes easier and easier with more exposure. And that's kind of the basis of what exposure therapy is. Pausing for any comments. Anybody want to say anything? How's that going for you? I'm going to actually type a comment just because I can do that in a live stream. How is everyone doing? Doing, that's 2 O's. Question mark. I'm only typing this out because there is actually the point where it's possible that not everyone is able to hear everything I'm saying in real time. Or maybe y'all are. I had this happen last week. Just side note. Last week, I had some people come in, some good friends that I haven't heard from a long time. They came into my personal Facebook page and they were making comments during the live stream, which I had absolutely no idea they were doing because they weren't coming through to this stream in my software here. And so then I went back and responded to everybody afterwards. But just letting you know, feel free to comment anytime. Where do we get mama? Boop. All right. Just going to use this as a more direct example now. All right. Pick anything that you decide to call terrible. Just war is terrible. People judging each other is terrible. Being forced to do things to your body that you don't want to do is terrible. Whatever the case that you decide that something is terrible for you, we're going to take a little experience break here. Let's experience this. It's terrible. So let me pick something here that I consider terrible, which, by the way, is a judgment, not an observation. It's terrible when my technology here cuts out while I'm doing a live stream. Okay? I'm going to say it's terrible when that happens. So I'm using these words way over wherever my hand is, these ones. I'm going to start. This is 3 here, okay? It's terrible. Now I'm going to just change the words. It's terrible when my technology cuts out while I'm in a live stream. Want to make this hit home a little bit more? You know, it's really terrible when I do something really nice for my partner. This is no reference to my current partner. I'm just trying to use something that clients normally talk to me about. It's terrible when I do something really nice for my partner and they don't even notice that I did it. And then they talk to me as if I never did anything nice at all. It's terrible. It's terrible. Now we're going to say that same thing using different words. I experience this as a terrible feeling inside of me when I do something really nice for my partner. They act like I never did anything at all, and then they treat me like I never did anything at all. I experience that as a terrible feeling inside of me. So the difference here is I, right there. That little I right there makes a big difference. It is externalizing something as being terrible. It's a judgment to say that thing, that experience, that person is terrible. That is definitely a personal opinion, but it doesn't feel like a personal opinion when we say it. Okay? This does not have responsibility in it. It is terrible. It will always be terrible. And I can only respond in one way, as to say, it is terrible. Okay. There is no I involved. So there is no responsibility, and there's no responsibility to make any changes on that either. Yeah. Thanks for the comments. So now if, let's say, dealing with people that are very spiteful, hateful, or judgmental in themselves, we can say that just even the experience is terrible, but we can say what in that experience is terrible. So like the way they're acting is terrible, the way they're judging is terrible, the way that they are trying to make me feel bad. So try and keep it to something that is a little bit more specific. And this is where the observing comes in. So we're going to practice that a little bit in this. So I experience it as a terrible experience inside of me when they are yelling or saying hateful things. I experience it as a terrible feeling when my partner is not even responding at all or acknowledging the good things I do. I experience it as a terrible feeling inside of me when all of my technology kicks off in the middle of a live stream. Check in with yourself now. How does this feel different to you versus it's terrible? I'm hoping that you recognize through observing your own body, through observing your reaction, as a difference between it's terrible and I experience it as terrible. Now we're going to switch out the words I experience to I call it terrible. So this is identifying, naming, judging. This is now where the freedom can start to come in. Because I experience it is a reaction, and it can be more difficult to choose what the reaction is. The reaction is a valid reaction. It's based on your history. It's based on nurturing, training, habituating. But I call it terrible. So I'd like for you to say these words in your mind. You can say it out loud. Nobody can hear you. I'm the only one on screen right now. How does it feel different? How does it make you act different? How do you think differently when you say, I call it terrible when somebody is saying hateful things? I call it terrible when my partner doesn't acknowledge what I do. Which one feels more empowering to you out of these three things? Do you have control over something when you think it's terrible? Do you feel that you have more control when you say that something is that you experience it as terrible? And do you feel like you have more control over a situation and your response when you say, I'm calling it terrible? Which one feels like more choice? You can even hear it in my voice. I can't even hide it, actually, while I'm saying it. Is it terrible? Well, I call it terrible. I mean, you can't, it's in the wording. The experience automatically changes. I'm just going to read some comments that are coming in because I want to support people live on this. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So somebody says, the feeling that I feel, I call that feeling terrible. The response that I have to somebody doing something hateful, the experience I have in my body, I call that a terrible feeling. So we're going to do this. We're going to do this one live. So you experience somebody doing something hateful, somebody doing something very hurtful, harmful, spiteful. Okay, and I'm generalizing this to everybody. Everybody, I'm saying you to you all. Imagine you're seeing somebody doing something very hateful to an animal, to another person. You're going to have a reaction. So let's observe that. Immediately there is a reaction. What is the reaction in your body? Imagine yourself seeing. Remember maybe being in an experience where you're seeing or feeling, experiencing, witnessing, hearing somebody doing something hateful, spiteful towards you or just towards someone else. Just feel what is the tension in your body. Where do you feel that tension? In your jaw, in your shoulder, in your neck, in your eyes, in your forehead, in your fists? Where's that tension? Just become aware of that. That is a reaction. And that reaction, we call that terrible, or as one person is mentioning, one person sharing here, they call that experience terrible. And this is a key point to where anxiety comes from. Because we can start to develop anxiety about an event that is coming up where we may feel reactions that we call terrible. And then we will develop anxiety over the thought of having a feeling that we call terrible. So what happens when we change that word right there, terrible? I just paused out there for a second, but I think I'm back. This is where the judgment is. Terrible. What is terrible inside of you? Let's observe that. And we'll go right back into, well, what I'm calling terrible is the tension that I feel when I see somebody being hurtful. What I'm calling terrible is the tension that the people they're being terrible about, and to the harm that they're creating. That tension feels terrible to me. Where's that tension coming from? This becomes the chicken before the egg. If you have, it's so much easier when we use if Donald Trump is standing there and he's talking about Mexicans. I like tugging at some nerves here, okay? Donald Trump standing there is talking about Mexicans in some way that's very harmful, okay? Hateful. To everybody that agrees with Donald Trump, from that perspective, they're like, yes, I feel good about this. And for everybody that's on the receiving end of that, it's like, what's this guy talking about? Like, no, we don't agree. This makes us feel bad. We're not being acknowledged for how good we are. We're definitely being blamed for something we're not doing. It's a scale, the scale of agreeing to disagreeing. So let's start with the very beginning. I disagree. I am not in alignment with what I'm witnessing. But what I'm witnessing is a person who's using words, a person who's using actions and energy. I'm witnessing somebody who seems to have the intent of wanting to put somebody else down and make them feel bad. And I am either in alignment with that, I'm on his side, or I'm not in alignment with that, I'm not on his side. That's where some people immediately jump to the terrible response. But take it in baby steps. Let's break it down. Once I decide that I'm not in alignment with that, something else has to happen after that. Do I feel tense? Do I feel scared? Do you feel trapped or helpless because Donald Trump is sitting on a TV somewhere saying something negative about someone? Where does the terrible feeling actually come from? Let's really get to the nitty-gritty of it. What's the core center of this? Does it remind you of when somebody did something towards you? How do we shift that? Oh, look at this lead in. Look at how planned this was. Bam. What happens when we change the words that we use to describe that event? What if you just start swapping out the words terrible? That person is being what? Hateful? Okay. Let's find some different words, synonyms, of course. What are some other things that person is being? Well, from an observational standpoint, I might witness somebody who's yelling at somebody as being loud. They are louder than normal. My internal scale of yelling is very different from some others. Italian background, yelling is kind of like normal speech patterns for me. Okay, talking loudly is like normal. So I might actually not even call that yelling. That person is talking way louder than they need to be talking right now. Way is another judgment. See how this gets really difficult. But let's just keep changing some of the words. Was that person yelling or are they talking really loudly? Why does it matter? Well, it kind of does, because it's going to change your reaction to it. You might feel very reactive to somebody who's yelling, but maybe less reactive to somebody who's just really loud. Is that person angry, or do I think they're angry? Are they being mean? Is the words that they're saying mean? Well, what about the people that they're saying it about? Are they reactive? If somebody says, I really don't like your clothes that you're wearing right now, the person on the receiving end, you might feel reactive. Oh no, my good friend is telling my other good friend, Julia is telling John that, let's go John and Julia. John is telling Julia that her prom dress looks silly, looks weird. Holy crap, I'm so worried now for Julia. Anxiety. Okay, well, let's break this down. John is telling Julia an opinion. Is it his personal opinion? Yes. Is he allowed to have that personal opinion? Sure. Okay, what's Julia's reaction to it? Hey, Julia, how do you feel that John thinks that your dress looks silly and is a terrible color? 2 options, 3 actually. Julia, I don't care. It's just an opinion. Neutral. 2, I totally agree. Actually, he's only saying that because I was already saying it. And 3, I feel horrible. I loved this thing, and now somebody says that it's terrible. So change the words on that event. Oh, I feel so terrible for Julia because John is saying that he doesn't like her dress. Okay. John is stating an opinion that John is allowed to have. John may not be aware that he's causing harm. John may not even have the intention of causing harm. John is simply stating an opinion. Whether or not I'm reactive about it is relative to whether or not I have judged if that is a good or bad situation. I don't really know. I might not have all the details. Let's go to Julia. Hey, Julia, how are you feeling about this situation? Well, actually, Peter, I'm finding that John's opinion is actually quite helpful. I never really thought of it that way. Oh, thank you, Julia. I'm glad that I've asked you because, I would not have had that opinion. I've learned something here. Oh, it's not a problem, Peter. I'm really happy that you've reached out and decided to, connect with me before making your own opinion. Well, I tend to form my own opinion based on past experiences of people being harmed from, when we don't like their dresses. Yes, I know. And definitely don't make a comment on my jeans. It does make me look fat. So, it's like, how much information is there here? And we have to observe the details in order to get to a point of understanding how much freedom we have to react to it. Does that land well? Does that make sense? Does it help to have a more direct experience to something that you're going through? Okay. So let's get into one more example before we close. Here's the hot button. We're going to use this special word right here. I'm actually going to type. I don't have this typed out. I'm going to type this out. Are you a victim? Think about something that you're really upset about that's happened to you. Think about something that you've been through. Somebody who was hateful towards you. Somebody who was unsupportive of you. Somebody didn't acknowledge how good you are. Somebody made you feel like you weren't good enough. When you think about how that made you feel, when you think about the negativity, the negative experience within you, somebody hit you, somebody slapped you, somebody abandoned you, somebody pulled the rug out from under you when you needed them most. They disappeared. They changed course. That makes you feel bad. That makes you feel lonely. That makes you feel unworthy. That makes you feel like you're not good enough. But do you call yourself a victim? So if there is something that you consider yourself to be a victim of, are you a victim of a hate crime? I am sorry that you are. I'm sorry that ever happened to you. Are you a victim of inappropriate touch? Are you a victim of verbal abuse? That one's more mine. Okay. What happens when we look at other words that state that we've been through it, but don't use the word victim? Why do you call yourself a victim, Peter, to verbal abuse? Well, because I went through verbal abuse and it made me feel terrible. Okay. So verbal abuse. So tell me about verbal abuse. Well, somebody said things about me that made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Okay. That's an opinion. How'd that make you feel? Well, it made me feel terrible inside. What else did it make you feel? Well, it made me feel, lonely, abandoned, disconnected, empty, whatever. Okay. And what did you learn from that? Well, I learned it's not good to do that. I mean, I learned my opinion. I learned who I am as a person. I learned that I don't like doing it. And so that taught me what I like and don't like, what I'm aligned to and what I'm not aligned to. It taught me what I want to be. Okay. So are you a victim? Well, what's a victim then? Well, it's a person who's been through something and feels bad about it, right? Well, what happens when you stop feeling bad about it? What happens when you learn what you like and don't like? What happens when you make changes within yourself and do good things in the world? Are you still a victim? See, here's the thing. We tend to want to call ourselves a victim to a situation because it gives us attention. It gives us validation. It helps for people to acknowledge where we are on a situation. But calling ourselves a victim, which of course is very, very true and valid, but over the course of time, if we continue to call ourselves a victim, we will actually be programming our brain into what kind of response to have to a situation. What if I don't call myself a victim to verbal abuse? What if I say I am a person who has experienced verbal abuse? I am a survivor of abuse. How does that change the way your body reacts to a situation? For anybody that wants to comment, what are some other things that you could call yourself besides a victim? So, survivor, victorious. I am a fighter. In some cases, the route that I went is I decided to call myself educated, wise, experienced. It's about deciding what kind of energy you want for people to focus at you. If you feel terrible inside and you've decided that that terrible feeling that you have is something that you want to be acknowledged for, you may continue to call yourself a victim far past when you're done with being one. If you've decided that you wish to be acknowledged for the pain that you went through, but you wish to be a fighter, a survivor, a helper, a warrior, a wise man, a wise woman, then you're going to have to change this word. And we change this word victim by breaking it down into what it means and observing the reactions, observing the thoughts, observing the feelings that we've decided to package into the word victim. Because how do you even know you are one? if I get bitten by a dog, I can say I'm a victim of a dog attack. I can also say I've been bitten by a dog. Why do I need to call it I'm a victim of a dog attack? Why do I even have to call it an attack? What is the difference between a dog biting me who's not attacking me and a dog who bit me that is attacking me? Why should I feel worse about the dog that attacked me? Is it personal? I still got the bite mark. I don't care what I call it. I got a bite mark. I don't like the pain that my nervous system is feeling when I am bitten by a dog. I don't want to be bitten by a dog. When we start saying I am a victim of a dog attack, I'm a victim of an emotional attack, I'm a victim of a physical attack, it's because we want to acknowledge the pain that we feel. But we have to be cautious for how long we decide to be victims, for how long we decide to, we are victims. My apologies for that wording. I will probably edit that out. We didn't decide to be victims. We are victims, but we decide, what I mean to say is, to stay victims. Okay? And I am a victim too. So I'm not talking like I don't know, that I haven't been there. I just haven't been everywhere. I can't be the victim of everything. But when do I take the responsibility for my reaction? And I start with changing the word. I was a victim. I was a victim of verbal abuse. I was a victim of physical attacks. I was a victim of carelessness. But when did I change? It changed when I changed the words. Now it changed when I decided to get over it and started to feel like I had distance and emotional distance, and I felt like I shared and was acknowledged. And then my label changed. I became less of a victim. Or I got over it and got distance, and I got over it faster, and I moved on and released my emotions once I changed the word. And you can decide which one you're ready for. But it's going to be both. We get some distance, we get some acknowledgement for the pain that we're experiencing, but we don't need to oversell it. We don't need to actually over-exaggerate a situation. And the way that we avoid it is by watching our words. Somebody raised their voice and said, "You're ugly to me." Okay. Am I a victim to verbal abuse? Well, only if I decide that I feel bad about that. Otherwise, I'm not really a victim. I hope that's clear, and I hope that helps. And if anybody wishes to ask questions, get feedback, share perspectives on that, feel free. And if those comments come, of course, on the replay on YouTube or Facebook, mostly YouTube, then I will respond to those, because this might be something where you don't have an idea right now and want to share that idea later. But how much power does that give you when you become aware of the response in your body when you observe through simply factual labeling? A person said something. I heard them. I then reacted to that. My reaction made me a victim. Then I decided to call myself a victim because I wanted to be acknowledged for the pain that I was caused or that I responded with. Let's get detailed. Let's really observe factually what those steps and stages are. Because when we get into the observing of the reaction, we can find the point at which we became the victim. Hi, everyone, for joining in and saying hello. We are live. I see people coming in. We have 5 minutes left. If anybody wants to ask any questions, feel free. I see that a couple of the people are actually watching on the Facebook personal account, and I can't see your comments while you're there. So for anybody that's watching in YouTube or in my business page, I can see your comments. So before we do kick off, I think what I'm going to do is actually go see if there are any comments on my Facebook page and hope that this doesn't mess up my screen. I'm assuming it will not. Okay, but just before I go, just leaving the floor open for any comments about that about this experience of breaking down the details of what you've been through, being a little bit more analytical of the facts of the matter, and then understanding where you've made interpretations. Now you can change your reaction and who you are by how you change your label, how you re-identify yourself. And if you don't call yourself a victim, does it become not a trauma anymore? That's a powerful question. Because a trauma is only a trauma if it is unexpressed and held in your body. And by labeling and identifying and shifting words, a stored energy, a stored tension, a stored emotion that gets expressed, by definition, becomes not a trauma anymore. Okay, we're going to go in just before I turn off, just in case I need to make any comments. I guess I should just get into the practice of having this up on my screen already, but here we are. It's pretty quick to bring up. And all right. I see that live. Oh, wow. There's lots of comments. We'll have to get used to responding, watching, having this up. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Ashley, for coming in. Ownership, humbling, eradication of projections. Ooh, I love it. Thank you so much. I see for some reason it says 17 comments, and yet I see 1, 2, 3, 4. So a little confusion there on my part. I experience myself as being confused right now. Checking in with our weekly Lydia. I'm going to read those last 2 comments out. Okay, Lydia? Yeah. So Lydia is saying that she keeps thinking of a true crime show on Netflix that it's called Worst Roommate Ever, which to me, I thought that just based on the title, I thought it was a reality show. And but apparently this isn't a reality show. It's a true crime show called Worst Roommate Ever. It was pretty impressive, Lydia says, how the women didn't come across as victims in the last segment because they survived it. Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Lydia. I can't show your comments on the screen because you're in private chat, just so you know. So I have to read those ones out. And looks like everyone's done for today. So thank you very much. And I'll go and respond to people in Facebook. Yeah, and not because it doesn't show me who's here. So, but shout outs to everybody that must be here because it says somebody's watching. And thank you very much. And let's call it another one in the bag. Okay. Thank you so much. And I don't know what I'm going to chat about. Oh, a comment actually came in. That's pretty awesome. Is that probably going to be Georgia? Yeah. Thanks, Georgia. All right. So just going to take a moment to hold space for anybody that this was a process for, just before I just turn this off. Take a deep breath. Because this can create a process, just the idea of changing. Okay, hopefully that frozenness doesn't stay. Yeah, just want to hold space for anybody that this is difficult for. that, so I'm just going to do a short prayer, a little bit of energy work. For anybody that's coming to a place of having to decide or let go of the idea of being a victim, I'd like to send out the energy and the prayer of release, of simply just coming to terms with something, acceptance, and releasing the internal fight against the label. And to send acknowledgement for what you've been through, to send acknowledgement now that you're not alone, that it was difficult and you deserve to be hurt. You deserve to be hurt. You deserve to feel bad about it. And you deserve to feel the need to be emotional, to cry, to be angry. And I want to acknowledge you and see you for what you've been through. And I want you to know that you're not alone. And that it is sad that these things exist in the world, but they are opportunities. They are things that happen to us all to show us what we are aligned to, what we want to be, and they give us purpose. When we know what we are aligned to, when we know what we are unaligned to, we don't have to say against, then it gives us focus. And let's focus on what we want to see. Let's focus on the change we want to see. Let's become the difference. And what you've been through gives you a reason to be a certain way, to be an activist, to be a lover, to be an artist. And let's have gratitude for the creativity that can come through you because of that. The connections that you're going to make because of that. The difference that you're going to make because of that. And let's transform that trauma into empowerment. Okay? So thank you very much for all that needed to hear that. And yes, thank you very much. Have a great night. Another great talk. Cheers. I'm just going to leave this here with you as we sign off.